We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
The councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
And we are live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10. This is Govern America. I'm Darren Weeks. Vicky Davis is here as well. It is the 6th of June now, 2020. As we get right back into the broadcast this week, once again documenting everything that's going on and documenting the history that's being made and unfolding all around us as we see this communist takeover take place here all across the country. And I do call it a communist takeover. That's very, very apparent to me what's going on. This isn't a civil rights march. This is an insurgency all across the country. When you have organized protests, coordinated protests, but not protests, but riots. There's nothing wrong with protesting. That is as American as apple pie. It's in our blood. But when you get into situations where you have violence and the only word that comes to mind is sedition. It's very apparent to me that this has been something that's been brewing for a long time. And I think it's a lot of masking as to what's going on really with the overall economy, how they are getting ready to crash everything. And they need cover. They need something to blame. So we've got COVID-19. We've got riots. We've got destruction of businesses and storefronts and facades. But the whole thing is a facade for the underlying corruption that's been taking place for many, many years. And, Vicky, good morning.
Good morning. And nothing is being done about it.
That's the problem. No. And that's the biggest clue, I think, that you could possibly have is the fact that nothing is being done about it.
Right. It's like a total stand down at the top. And, despite Trump's threats, to send in the military, he wouldn't, I don't think he would ever do that because I think things are just going along as planned.
Yeah, and that's a pretty frightening situation if that's true. And I can't say you're wrong at this stage of the game. Certainly we have Defense Secretary Mark Esper. Mark Esper has just come out and said that the National Guard in Washington, D.C. isn't allowed to carry firearms.
Yeah. He should have been fired when he contradicted the president. No matter what, he should have been fired.
Now, how can you essentially go into a war zone, which is what this is, without carrying a firearm?
Yeah. Well, you know what? When they sent our troops over to Iraq, it seemed to me like they were just sending them into a grinder because I don't know if you remember the debate in Congress about I thought it was $84 billion for the war over there, but I guess it was $87 billion. It seemed to me that in that debate, it was almost like they were holding our soldiers hostage.
Yeah.
Give us the money, or, our soldiers will be over there without bullets, without armored vehicles, without anything.
Yeah, and what do you do in a situation like that when you're a soldier? I mean, you pretty much are left defenseless. They're trained not to challenge authority and to obey orders without question and all this other stuff, but you're expected to go into basically a suicidal situation.
Yeah.
This is just absolutely out of... What a treachery. What an absolute treachery.
Well, I can't think of a single thing that our government has done, through all the time that I've been researching, over the time frame that I've been researching, that has been for our country, for our people. We've had treason at the top for decades and decades, since they joined the United Nations.
Yeah,
I think our government was communist at the time that they joined, and they've been destroying everything that was American, and our economy and our country, our culture, everything, ever since.
The the Daily Mail reports the Pentagon has told Washington, D.C.'s National Guard and Guardsmen from other states in the capital not to use guns or ammunition. The order came from Defense Secretary Mark Esper and was made without the Pentagon consulting the White House. Trump has pushed for a strong militarized show of force against protests. Meanwhile, the Pentagon will send back the remaining 900 active duty troops who were sent to the D.C. area to their home bases.
Trump better fire that SOB.
Yeah, I mean, this to me is indicative of the treachery that we have in the highest levels of government. Mm-hmm. Just like you were saying. Incidentally, before we get too deeply into this, there was a couple of things also that Trump signed an executive order, and this is completely unrelated, but he signed an executive order promoting American seafood competitiveness and economic growth, as they put it in the executive order. What he's doing is he's opening the waterways, the protected waterways of the United States to commercial fishermen. So that was done yesterday. They had a meeting yesterday where he did that, open federal waterways to commercial fishermen. I'll put that in the show notes for those that want to read it. I just thought it was worthy of a mention. Certainly.
What bodies of water does that include?
I don't know the details. I have not read it. It's just something I saw yesterday, and I thought it would be of interest to the audience.
Uh-huh. Okay.
I got it before me.
I saw that. Press conference, and I thought it was a little odd. But I know that over, since 2001, maybe before that, I don't know, but the president will have people into the White House and, to talk about their economic problems and then how he's going to fix them, or, cheerleading basically for business.
I think, it could be something that he... Well, I don't know. We know that it's probably not something that would happen under a Democrat administration. There are some things that are, in fact, I think these are waterways that Obama put off limits. I think I read that somewhere.
Huh, okay.
So, anyway, it'll be in the show notes for those that want. I just thought it was interesting, and it's one of those things that... Very time-consuming, all this stuff. You can spend a lifetime trying to digest everything that's happening today.
Right, in each segment of the economy, because it's like across the board, everything in our country is kind of falling apart. It's kind of disintegrating, and but they have these programs to show the president doing something.
Yeah. Well,
they got somebody, but not the whole country.
Yeah, there's some minor differences between Democrat and Republican administrations. There has to be, but the overall plan for world government seems to move forward regardless of who's in power. it's interesting to watch how this whole thing. It's like we've described it repeatedly as tag team tyranny. One party will take office and they push their side of it a little more for a while, and then the other side takes office and they'll push it a little more from that standpoint. But it's the overall plan for world government continues to move forward. I'm very alarmed at the rate at which our country is being destroyed right now. The social fabric is being destroyed. It looks like they're even holding these protests now out in rural areas in some places. Mm-hmm. I was reading that this morning because I think the idea is to make sure that nobody feels safe, including rural folk. So they got to make sure that they hold these things. But I can tell you right now, if they think they're going to start coming out into the countryside or the suburbs and start looting people's homes, they better bring some body bags with them because they're going to need them for themselves.
I know that's true in Idaho for sure.
That's true everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the one thing we got going on our side, is that still, after all this time, all the massed, staged shooting events that took place all across the country, the real ones and the staged ones, because there are real ones, they have not been able to successfully take the guns from the people.
Uh-huh.
And that needs to stay that way. Because
and after these riots, they'll never be able to do it.
Well, that's the thing.
It will have to be a fight to the death because nobody is going to disarm in a situation in which there's a communist takeover in progress.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. You hit on a good point, Vicky. If they were trying to advance gun control, this is probably the dumbest thing that they could have possibly done. Because they've set gun control back years, decades probably. Because, like you said, nobody's going to give up their guns now. There's no way. People that didn't want a gun before are going to certainly want one now when they see the possibility of all these thugs coming to their door.
Yeah, I bet gun sales have been going up.
Have to be through the roof.
As a matter of fact, I've considered it myself.
Through the roof. And, like Cassandra Fairbanks, I was just reading the other day. She had this mob at her door. Somebody posted her address, her home address, on the internet. And she had a mob of these maniacs threatening her from outside her home.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was just her and her 9-year-old, I think, daughter, I want to say. But imagine a woman who is home alone, and I don't know what her relationship status is or anything about her, but I can just imagine a woman home alone with her young daughter, I think it was. I don't know if it's daughter or son for sure, but, her 9-year-old kid. And you got a mob of people threatening you. Threatening your safety. It's just astounding to me. So, one other thing that's going beneath the scenes that people don't seem to know about or probably won't hear much about is, the deep state criminal cabal is moving forward. There's a lawsuit that was filed by Judicial Watch. It's been moving through the court seeking information about Hillary Clinton and Benghazi documents, the Hillary emails. Back in March, Judge Royce Lamberth ruled that Hillary Clinton had to testify in the case. And she's been fighting it tooth and nail. According to Judicial Watch, on March 2nd, Judge Lamberth granted Judicial Watch's discovery that includes taking testimony from Hillary Clinton and her chief of staff, Cheryl Mills, under oath regarding Clinton's emails and the existence about records about the Benghazi attack. And now, in April, Judicial Watch and the State Department, which is represented by the Department of Justice lawyers, filed responses opposing Clinton and Mills' request to overturn the order requiring their testimony. Even though the Justice Department is pushing for Hillary to testify, it seems like that would be the case given that they were they took that action. They refused to argue the case. They still refuse to argue the case before the court, which proves to me that Bill Barr is still part of the problem. Now, this is Tom Fenton. He was on with Lou Dobbs talking about the case.
Well, we don't know. There's a hearing tomorrow. She filed also a writ of mandamus. She was ordered to testify, and she filed an emergency writ saying she was too important to testify. There's nothing else that can be learned from her testimony. A federal court judge has disagreed and wants to know whether her use of emails was designed to thwart FOIA. And unfortunately, the State Department had been defending her. But even now, though, the Justice Department abandoned her. And this is interesting. They said they didn't agree with her appeal, but didn't want to argue before the court. And the court said, you're arguing. So even when they're helping us in terms of defending the rule of law, the Justice Department is still trying to hide. We'll see what happens with Hillary Clinton tomorrow. But as like I said, Beth Wilkinson is representing her top aide, Cheryl Mills, free of charge. And she had represented many of those witnesses as well during the Emailgate scandal.
Astounding. Your sense as to why the Justice Department would not be doing, once again, what seems to be an obvious and right thing to do.
Well, they did not want Mrs. Clinton to be deposed to begin with. They wanted to shut us down, but they lost. And then Mrs. Clinton made this dramatic appeal, and they said they didn't want to do that, and they disagreed that she didn't have the right to seek protection from the court. After all, she's a government official who's been out of office for years, and there's no emergency to stop her from having to testify. But on the other hand, Lou, we have other litigation where the State Department has just said and told us that what Hillary Clinton did in terms of taking emails is no big deal, and we shouldn't get any more information about what happened. Look, the deep state is still running the show and still protecting Hillary Clinton. By the way, the statute of limitations on all of this hasn't run yet. There's a good reason for the stall tactics.
So there you go. That's just to put that on people's radar. That is still going on behind the scenes as well. And you're not going to hear much about it from the establishment media, I guarantee it. What do you think?
Well, that just says just about everything we need to know about Bill Barr, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And
because he's the guy in charge, and so if his department is blocking or trying to run interference on that, then
he's a secret agent. He's a double agent. He's a double agent. He's working the other side.
I figured that when he was playing the bagpipes, that he. I hate to say this, but he's just a tool of the British Empire, and that kind of sounds like a conspiracy theory. But the
we would never
Empire is alive and well in the form of the Commonwealth of Nations.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I never liked him in the first place because of the. Was it Ruby Ridge he was involved in? Yeah, as I recall.
Lon Horiashu, or whatever his name is.
He represented, I think, pro bono, the snipers. that
murdered Vicky Weaver.
Vicky Weaver, that's right, while she was holding her baby. Now, you got to be a pretty bad scumbag to pro bono represent somebody like that.
Who shoots a woman with holding a baby?
Yeah, and to say positive things about your client. Anyway,
I don't.
I could never look at him as a constitutionalist like he claims. That doesn't mean they don't occasionally say things that are accurate. And we've played audio before from him on the show where he was saying accurate things. Different things about the structure, the balance of power. But a stop clock, folks, is right twice a day.
Structure and the balance of power. Our structure has been basically dismantled.
Yeah.
Under globalization. And you can see it collapsing, which is why these Antifa people are trying to take over. And they're even talking about dissolving the police. I mean, what kind of thinking is there that says, yeah, we should dissolve the police?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is that in the midst of all of this, you have a number of different public officials, I'll call them, for lack of calling them something else, that are talking about defunding the police and cutting budgets. And they're in some cases they are. When you got more crime,
defunding is effectively getting rid of them. I mean,
yes, there would be layoffs and things like that. They're not going to take a salary cut.
Mm-hmm.
And we come back to the massacre at Tiananmen Square. Why bring this up? Because this past Thursday was the anniversary of the massacre at Tiananmen Square. Campus Reform paid a visit to the University of Florida to see what students were being taught about it, what they might know. Because, Vicky, when you go onto a college campus, these institutes of higher learning, or as I call them, higher indoctrination, you're going to expect them to have taught the college students there, that you're supposed to have a well-rounded education, correct?
Theoretically.
Yeah, so you're going to expect that they're going to know all about the Tiananmen Square massacre. Well, this is what Campus Reform found.
All right, so the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square protest is tomorrow. Are you guys familiar with the event at all?
I don't know anything about it.
I have no idea what it is. I don't know very much at all about it.
I'm pretty sure it was in China, and I think that's the extent of my knowledge on that.
How much do you know about the Tiananmen Square protests?
I've never heard of it.
Nothing at all, actually. Nothing.
Nothing at all?
No. Nothing at all.
It was in China. It was 1989, I believe, and it was a lot of civilians got killed for peaceful protesting.
Not too much. I know it happened in China. I think it was a peaceful protest that was pretty forcefully put down by the Chinese government.
China's influence on campus is greater than ever. There have been a lot of questions about their influence on American college campuses. So there's a lot of money pumped into what our national security agencies call propaganda efforts. They've been paying professors and staff members to steal research. Do you think China poses a threat to American college campuses and its students?
I'd say possibly.
I don't think it's a huge threat, but it's definitely a possibility to be a threat.
I would have to say no, but honestly, I'm not too educated in the subject, so I can't really give an educated opinion about it. But as far as what I've experienced so far, I would have to say no.
I don't really know that much about it, but I would also say no. I don't really think that I have an opinion on the matter because I'm not very knowledgeable about the research or being done, and I don't want to speak on something and not be knowledgeable and educated about it.
And that's definitely something to look into, but I also don't really know enough about the subject to really opine about it.
Does it change your mind at all that some of our national intelligence agencies like the FBI and the Homeland Security have warned that campuses are a soft target? Or, just as an example, we've had a couple professors arrested. There was a professor at Harvard who was arrested a couple months ago. He's just one of many in the last year or two who've been arrested for basically smuggling research, selling research out of the country. Does that change your mind at all?
Not really. I mean, intelligence, knowledge, academic knowledge, should be a free resources.
I guess, yeah, in a very broad sense, yes. Not like a direct threat, but a more global threat.
Does it change your mind at all, for example, that some China experts say that America loses $600 billion in intellectual property each year? China steals $600 billion worth of IP.
I think definitely more research on the matter.
And I think it sounds like it's something to look into that we should probably be cautious about, but I definitely need to also educate myself.
But if they're taking it from us, it would be better if they would just ask.
Yeah. How dare they just take thinking. It? It's so impolite. Very impolite.
But China couldn't do anything that nothing could be done against this country without the aid and comfort of our government.
Yes.
And, they opened the door to the Chinese.
Yes, they did.
They wrote, the Senate ratified all of the treaties, the World Trade Organization, and all of the international agreements with other countries. They ratified those agreements. So
We built them up.
What we have is that the East Coast, all along the coast, I don't know, they live in a different world than the rest of the country. Mm-hmm. They've got their own world, and we're not part of it.
Yeah. We built them up so that we could face them tomorrow. So many times this happens, it seems. We build the enemy up so that at a future date we could face them in battle.
Yeah, so they could knock us down.
Yeah, exactly.
But they always miss, the East Coast is always fine. It's just the rest of the country that gets knocked down.
I got one more.
It's really quite stunning, actually, when you go through and count the ways that our country has been betrayed by the East Coast liberals.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I got one more clip from that college campus thing, and this by far is one of the most profound comments. See if you can follow what this girl says.
I would say the reason that there is theft going on is because people think they have to steal because people aren't going to assess their individual needs, so they resort to dire measures. As to why people don't know this is happening, a lot of the young generation is kind of tapped out to big news and things like that. If it's something like research that is being stolen, I think it definitely deserves consequences and reporting of it, so as to prevent it from happening any further.
Maybe we could...
I was having a hard time figuring out what her subject matter was.
Well, we're talking about the communist Chinese still.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, my favorite here.
I would say the reason that there is theft going on is because people think they have to steal because people aren't going to assess their individual needs.
We're talking about the Chinese here. People aren't going to assess their individual needs, so they got to steal.
I don't even know what that means.
I know, that's what I'm saying. That's why I said, see if you can follow what this girl is saying. It's, okay, very, very crazy. But anyway, this past Thursday was the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre, and it's I think relevant for many reasons, not the least of which we seem to have the stage set for our own Tiananmen Square here in this country right now. Ultimately, what will happen when the police do crack down, because that will have to happen. It's going to have to happen.
I thought Trump was going to declare Antifa domestic terrorists.
Well, he already did.
He did do that? Did he sign an executive order?
I actually... He declared it verbally. I don't know that he actually did put it on paper yet.
Yeah, well, see, that's a problem, because just saying it doesn't carry the force of law.
Right.
Doesn't tell the agencies. And as a matter of fact, SB, the Secretary of Defense, countermanded the president if it's true that Trump did declare them domestic terrorists.
I'm looking this up. Okay. So he says 6 days ago, it will be declared.
Will be. Uh-huh.
So we're still waiting, I guess.
Well, if he was going to do it, why didn't he just do it then? I mean, what's the big deal? Just declare it.
I don't know. I'm sure he doesn't write these things himself. It probably has to go through his legal counsel and all that. I'm sure that the legal staff actually hammers out exactly what these things are going to say, and he reads them through, and if he approves of it and signs it. That's what I'm thinking. Maybe it's in the works.
Oh, maybe.
Maybe they're doing research on it. But it will be, when he says it will be declared.
Justice, I think it'll get lost.
Well, I don't even know if it has to go to the Justice Department.
Well, that's the only department it would go to, right? They're the center of law.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't know enough about how his cabinet and who exactly writes these things. Yeah, you would think the Justice Department would be involved, but they got so many lawyers around there.
Well, that's true, but they also each have their own particular job to do.
Yeah.
But Bill Barr may actually be the holdup on it. Who
could
knows,
be.
you know?
Well, it could be a bunch of his friends in there. All of his buddies.
Yeah.
Now they're bragging about there's 2.76 million layoffs in May, Vicky. Far fewer than expected. U.S. businesses shed 2.8 million jobs in May, significantly less than the 9.3 million job losses that were expected. So good news. We only had 2.8 million jobs lost in May, according to the payroll company ADP. They reported that Wednesday that businesses have let go of a combined 22.6 million jobs since March, with the bulk of the layoffs occurring in April. The virus, which we've almost forgotten about the virus, except there's people wearing face masks everywhere now, and that seems to be permanent. But they say the virus forced employers to shutter offices, factories, gyms, and schools, while demand for gasoline, clothing, airline tickets, hotel rooms, and restaurant meals quickly vanished. I find it interesting, too, though, that gasoline is already back above $2 a gallon here in southern Michigan, and yet we had this not too long ago. Wasn't that long ago. We had this massive glut of oil. So much so that they had no place to put it and were storing it on oil tankers out in the middle of the ocean. So my question is, how could we have gasoline back above $2 a gallon when you had all this extra oil? And the only conclusion I can come to is that oil is being artificially propped up.
Oh, I think they're running our economy on models. It's all modeling. I don't think they use any real statistics. I really don't. I mean, I proved that a few, 2005 or 2006. And anyway, that they were not using real employment numbers or unemployment numbers because the reports from the Social Security Administration, where they were reporting actual employer payments on Social Security, were being modeled because they didn't reflect the layoffs, the massive layoffs that occurred around the year 2001, 2002. But, they just kept going up at a steady state.
Yeah.
And that only happens in models. That doesn't happen if you're using real numbers.
Well, I noticed that it seems like when oil goes up, so does the overall stock market. And when oil goes down, there tends to be a relationship between the market.
Yeah, well, that would be sustainable, wouldn't it? Under Agenda 21, Agenda 2030. We're supposed to kick the oil habit.
Well, I don't think they're ever going to do that as long as the dollar is attached to the oil. And I'm thinking that, and this is just my theory.
I don't think they'll be able to do it anyway until they have
some
economically viable alternative.
Right.
And they don't have it.
Yeah. But,
and the renewable energy that we do have, these renewable energy facilities around in the country, I think that all they're doing is creating a slush fund of money for the people who are actually working against us, because of the renewable energy credits that are generated by the renewable energy companies that they can then sell to make more money. I mean, it's really a scam. It's kind of like an extraction from the electric ratepayers into the pockets of the renewable energy leftists and the some of the some of them are owned by the Chinese. I don't know how many of them, but so it's an extraction just straight out of the economy into the hands of those people.
Yeah. One thing that we do have is plenty of politics, and of course, the fact that we have now ABC News is reporting U.S. unemployment rate fell slightly to 13.3% in May. They're all heralding this as good news. This is great news. It's not as bad as we expected. Yet, how many of these stores are put out of business? A lot of these jobs will not be coming back because a lot of people have gone permanently unemployed, and due to the resulting damage that's ongoing to many of these cities, a lot of these towns and businesses are going to be going out, and so those won't be coming back, many of them either, because insurers will not insure in certain places where they think that riots are going to break out. It's just common sense.
Right.
Already we're getting reports, but that doesn't stop people like the DNC chair Tom Perez from doing the political game.
Over the last 3 months, Andrea, we have seen 19.6 million jobs lost over the last 3 months. To give you perspective, Andrea, in the worst 3 months of the Obama administration, the worst 3 month period, we had 2.3 million jobs lost. Every president since FDR has seen net job growth in their presidency until now with Donald Trump.
Excuse me. In fairness, there was a pandemic. But let me just say, in fairness, there was a pandemic which caused a complete shutdown of the economy. Now, it's not the greatest jobs ever, but the fact is it's coming back from a flat line.
Well, but the reality, Andrea, is it didn't have to be this way. What we know is that last December, last January, last February, this president was asleep at the switch. When he should have been acting, when he should have been listening to his experts, he instead was negotiating a trade deal with China. He wanted to get that trade deal, and that was a crappy trade deal he got. And so here we are now. It has exacerbated the extent of the job loss.
So he starts giving these statistics, completely ignoring the fact that the shutdown was due to the pandemic, the alleged pandemic anyway, and playing this political game. I think all of this stuff is going to backfire on the Democrats. I think they're throwing all this stuff out there. Many of this, it started off, this has been a constant barrage. The American people have been through so much the past 3.5, going on almost 4 years now. We've been through the Mueller investigations. We've been through constant bombardment of it's just been one thing after another. The pandemic, and now the civil unrest, riots. We have been through so much the last few years. And it's just been a constant bombardment. Is this what they're going to do? My question is, how much of this is because of the election? Because they're trying to take Donald Trump down. And certainly I'm not painting Donald Trump as an angel, because he's not. But I wonder how much of this, even the civil unrest that's going on right now, is political. Because they have nothing else. Certainly Joe Biden is a laughingstock. And nobody's excited about Joe Biden on the left that I can see.
He was their worst possible choice.
and yet the worst possible choice would be Hillary, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of even Steven, I think.
Well, there are establishment
at least Hillary
candidates.
Is coherent, at least.
People want
she's not
something
out of her,
different.
She's an evil monster, but she's not incoherent.
People want something different, and I really think that these establishment shills that they're putting out in front of people are being rejected by people largely. People want something different. They don't want the status quo anymore. And I think that's both on the left and the right. If the left and the right would ever start talking to each other instead of screaming at each other and arguing and try to find the points that we agree on, there's a lot that we could agree on. I don't think I think most people, and I'm talking about reasonable people, not the extremists. I'm talking about reasonable people want something. They want the country to be stable. They want the country to be, they don't want a police state. But you've got all these politicians that are put forward that are establishment shells. There's no change whatsoever. And I think people are just tired of it.
Well, you know what? Our country, and this is my opinion from what I've read and what I've studied, our economy was structurally destroyed by globalization. It started after 1995, and we had the exodus of manufacturers out of the country, and they, in the diagram that I have that was produced by Mark Tucker of the a Carnegie-funded organization called the National Center for Education and the Economy, they showed the structure of the American economy to be primarily research and development, high-end jobs. Now, in the old world, when we had a functioning economy, research and development was a very small part of the economy. Why? Because it's expensive and because you need a lot of really smart people. But they thought they thought that they could build an innovation economy. There's that word, innovation, and that everybody could be a programmer. Everybody could be a scientist. No limitations. Everybody can get out there and innovate, except that it's all a government-funded job.
Yeah.
That's all government funding.
All grant money.
You can't have an economy like that.
Yeah.
It's not an economy.
A knowledge-based economy.
Exactly.
Well, after they gutted our manufacturing base, they told us we had a service economy. And then that started to go. A lot of the services went over to India and other places. And then now it became a knowledge-based economy. Well, how could we have a knowledge-based economy when they've been dumbing down our population for decades? That's the question I have. Here we see from MSN.com, Mayor Lori Lightfoot denounces vigilantism in Chicago after white men patrol neighborhood streets with bats. Now, they got, they're doing everything they can to put the clamp down on guns in Chicago. But so now people are trying to patrol the streets with bats, trying to patrol the neighborhoods, trying to keep things under control. The very thing that Lightfoot should be working to do herself. And yet, again, where are they? Where are the officials doing the right thing? Well, I'll tell you what they're doing in D.C. The D.C. mayor, Bowser, has had Black Lives Matter painted on the streets. Did you see this?
No, I didn't.
Muriel Bowser on Friday had Black Lives Matter in big yellow letters painted on the streets that leads to the White House, where protesters have been demonstrating following George Floyd's death. And who is this George Floyd? And I want to say something about this whole circumstance that triggered all this, Vicky, because I was thinking about this last week. I really think I missed the mark last week, and I'll tell you why. I think I should have taken a different tact on this. Rather than saying this guy was murdered, this George Floyd. I mean, people have got to remember, these officers who were around this situation at the time, or even the guy with the knee on the neck, these guys are all innocent until proven guilty. And that is something that has been completely lost in the conversation. The problem I have, and you can say, well, I watched the video, it looks pretty conclusive. Yeah, it looks conclusive. But the problem I have with all of these events that go viral on the internet is that we have no idea what happened in the events leading up to the actual event. Something that could have changed the whole, if you put something in context. Like, for instance, let's just say you're out and about, and you're out cutting something with a knife. Somebody comes up from behind you and attacks you, throws you on the ground, tries to rape you. Okay? You manage to find your way to your feet, and you start stabbing the guy with the knife you happen to have in your hand. Okay? And the cops come. There's a crowd around that gathers. Somebody calls the cops. They come. They take the guy away. Okay, you go back to your life. Next thing you know, you're getting death threats. Next thing you know, your employer's calling, telling you that you're not welcome back into the office. Okay? And next thing you know, you're on TV. And the video that's showing you violently assaulting this man. Okay? Now that's a scenario I just outlined, just made up. But that is a kind of thing that happens. Now, had they shown where he attacked you first, that might have actually that would have changed the whole situation because you put it in the proper context. The problem I have right now is that we're getting videos that just pop up on the internet that seem to show one thing. And I'm not saying this situation is like this or not. But so many situations are like this. And this could be completely changed. We don't know what happened. We do know that this George Floyd was resisting arrest. Okay? Because there are surveillance video that show that they were having a hard time getting him into the police car. Now, does that mean that he should be murdered? No, but the autopsy report, and that's the other thing, is I laughed last week when I mentioned that it said he had underlying conditions. But there were other things that were going on. Some people were saying that he was drugged, so that could have contributed to his death.
I've read about that where people on PCP
and they get supernatural
strength.
They
almost get like superhuman strength or something.
So my question is, and the Minneapolis Police Manual, my understanding is the Minneapolis Police Manual approved this method of detaining somebody, of holding them down when other situations wouldn't work. So it sounds like this guy, this officer, was following protocol. And if that's the case, he could very well get off of these charges. But I don't know. I'm not saying I know what's going on or what's not going on. I'm just saying videos can be deceiving. Videos often are deceiving. It's like that. Did you follow that woman in the park?
Which woman?
See, I'm trying to remember her name. There is a woman, they're calling her the Karen in the park. And that's another thing. I don't like this Karen meme either. But I could probably find it real quick. Yeah, here we go. This woman, her name is Amy Cooper. And she was in the park, and she was walking her dog. And she was walking her dog without a leash in this particular place in Central Park in New York. And a leash on. She was supposed to have the leash on. Okay, so she was breaking the rules. She wanted her dog to get some exercise. Along came this black gentleman, and his name, ironically, his last name also was Cooper. His first name was Christian. He was Christian Cooper. And he told her to get her dog on the leash. And she says she didn't want to get her dog on the leash. And so evidently they had words. And he said something to the effect, and it came out later that he said something to the effect that I have to do what I have to do. Now, the way the video shows, it doesn't show him saying that. All it does is it shows him videoing her in the park, and she says, "Don't film me, don't film me." And she starts freaking out. And so she calls 911 and she says, "I'm going to call the police." and I'm going to tell him a black man is threatening me. Or she says African American. So he says, please, go ahead, call the police. And so she calls the police, and she starts freaking out on the phone, saying, I'm being threatened by an African American man. And so eventually she puts her dog on the leash, and he moves on. But it later came out, but this video went viral as she's one of these Karens. And the whole idea of a Karen, I guess, is that these are people who are. It's a stereotype. It's a female who tends to be kind of a drama queen who asks for the type of person that's always asking for management all the time at a restaurant or someplace.
I've been a Karen on certain occasions.
Everyone would fit the stereotype at some time or another. But the problem is I don't like this.
Women can't punch the person in the face, so they act like a Karen because that's all they can do.
But I don't like this. Number one, I've known a lot of people named Karen over the years that haven't been like that. So I think it's unfair to people named Karen. But it's also unfair to stereotype people in any context. But this woman, it came out later after her life is destroyed. And that's the point. I don't
her
like...
life is destroyed over...
Yes, the video went viral. All of a sudden, Vicky, she's a racist because she said she's being threatened by an African American man.
Well, you always got to give a description of the person who is threatening you.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Because she called the cops on an African American man. Now she's a racist. She had a job at Franklin Templeton Investments, and they got her fired. Her employer fired her because they said, they wanted to distance themselves from her because she's damaged goods. So she's living in New York City, getting death threats. Her life is destroyed. Her dog was taken away from her because as she was talking on the phone, her dog wasn't on the leash, so she's holding it by its collar, and at times it was dangling in the air because she's not paying attention to the dog. She's paying attention to the circumstance. And then later, he comes out and admits that he says, I've got to do what I got to do. Well, if you're a female out there in the middle of a park by yourself, and some guy, I don't care what color he is, says to you, I've got to do what I've got to do. And he starts reaching in his pocket to get a dog treat, but you don't know what he's reaching for. You're going to feel threatened. And then he starts filming you. You're going to feel threatened. I have every reason to believe this woman felt threatened. And so she was just telling the truth about what she was feeling at the time, but now her life is destroyed. And this is the problem I have with all of these videos, because they don't show the whole story. They don't show the whole story. So I want to admonish everybody.
True. I've watched so many videos on the internet where they only show, and I'm not just talking about involving black people, but just involving police and what the police are doing. When they show the video, they only show a tiny segment of it. But when you see the entire length of the film, it changes the story entirely.
Absolutely. Because then you have context to go with it.
Yeah.
And you take anything out of context, it completely changes the meaning. And that's the problem I have with all of this stuff.
The people that do that should be arrested somehow, for propaganda.
Well, I don't think you can arrest somebody.
I do think they should be arrested because they are intentionally creating a scenario in which they're making police or somebody look bad. And then those people get death threats or lose their job. It's not a victimless crime when you do that. No. Whoever that happens to is a victim.
Absolutely, they're a victim. But the problem is you'd be hard pressed to get somebody to even represent them. I don't know. Maybe there should be some advocacy organization, because what we have here right now, this is really what a democracy in action looks like. Vicky?
Well, not really. We are going through a cultural communist revolution. So this is not the norm.
It's the mob. It's the mob rule.
When I was growing up, the police were not the enemy. The police didn't become the enemy until our communities started being flooded with drugs.
Yeah. Well, we're almost out of this first hour already, unbelievably. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, about how the gun control has been set back. There's a lot of different ways. If you want to talk about race relations, let's talk about the fact that, and it is a fact, that the Ku Klux Klan will be making a big comeback. With all of this stuff going on, I guarantee you it's not hard to predict. As a matter of fact, they just found a cross burning on a bridge in Alabama.
Yeah, and you know who does that kind of crap most of the time? The ACLU.
Maybe. But this is not going to help anything, Vicky.
Well, that's true.
It's certainly not going to help race relations.
Find out who's doing it first. You know what? They are acting like this is 1950s, as if nothing has happened since Brown versus the Board of Education, as if black people are oppressed, and they are not. They have been given affirmative action and preferential treatment, and God, nobody can say a word, no matter how bad the behavior.
Okay, we got to take a break here. Let's take the top of the hour break. We'll be back.
Before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order. New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
The councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
I'm walking through filth like I'm an animal. I feel like a damn sewer rat. None of this is cool. My mama can't get her medicine. What's she gonna do without her medicine? What is she gonna do without her medicine? Our babies who need formula. Everything is gone. And y'all out here stealing formula and selling it for double the price. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. And meanwhile, you can't even go to Indiana. They won't even let you in. Meanwhile, they chilling in Hyde Park and up north. Them white folks came all the way from the north side to help us up our shit. And we think it's cool and we think it's funny. I don't want this nasty everybody been touching on. Can't even feed my damn kids. Can't even feed my kids. Like I'm feeling like a damn animal. Look at all this on the floor. Look at all this on the floor. Everything. And there's nothing to take. But y'all so worried about stupid shit. There's nothing in there for us to take. Everything has been touched and thrown on the ground. Y'all think this shit is funny. It's not f***ing funny. Them white people laughing, having a fucking field day. Came up here, helped y'all fuck up your south side. While they pillaging and having fun on their north side. This shit's not funny. All the white folks came down here, left the north side to come up here and help us do this stupid shit. Baby, all them already kids out here not eating. What you want me to pick through that like I'm an animal? Picking through it like some damn sewer rat. I'm not gonna pick through that and give that to my children.
Live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10, this is the second hour of Government America. I'm Darren Weeks. That was a woman walking through a pillaged store. She said she does work, unfortunately, though, she's a little misdirected in her anger. Yes, white people helped pillage the neighborhood, helped loot the stores, but she needs to understand where this all is coming from. This isn't a race relationship. This isn't a race war, or it shouldn't be. What people need to understand is who the real enemy is. And that is exactly what I would maintain is why all this is going on. To keep people from understanding who the real enemy is. It's George Soros and the Open Society Foundation. It's all these billionaires who've declared war on the American people. I don't have a problem with people making money. I don't have a problem with people doing well for themselves. The problem I have is when billionaires decide to spend their money to control the population that are not billionaires. That's where I have a problem, Vicky.
Yeah, well, the black people in this country have been so propagandized for so long.
We've all been propagandized.
That's all they think about is immediately black, black, black. But if they were to take an honest look at poor whites that are whites that are in their same situation, our economy has been destroyed, and this wedge that the communists have put between the blacks and the whites and the Hispanics keep people from seeing that it's a war on all of us.
Yes.
All of us.
Yes.
You know, if you're not a millionaire, there is a war on you, and it doesn't make any difference what color you are.
That's exactly right. You know, we're in a situation, I would say even the millionaires are a little bit low ranking in that totem pole anymore.
I agree.
With the way the inflation, I would say billionaires, or at least multimillionaires. Mm-hmm. The limousine liberals, as they call them, in many respects. But also, there's plenty of conservatives. You know, because at that level, it doesn't matter whether you're on the left or whether you're on the right. This is not a left versus right issue. This is not a skin color issue. This is an issue which is the multi-billionaire rich are declaring war. You know, the Bill Gates types. These are the people that are declaring war on all of us. And it's been going on for so many years, and they use the media to help exaggerate all these divisions because they have to divide and conquer and keep people fighting amongst each other.
Yes, so that and I noticed that even before I was politically active, it's the political parties always had you look down rather than looking up for the source of the problem. So you always think that the Republicans always thought the poor people were the problem. But the problem is with that thinking is poor people have no power. They have no power, really. They can't buy a politician. So, and it's all the poor people. It's just that culturally they handle it a different way. And so, unfortunately, where they should be looking for people that are in their same boat, they let the skin color act as a fence or a wall between them.
Yeah. By the way, regarding this Amy Cooper, Jane MC in the chat room says what he actually said was, "You're doing what you want, so I'll do what I want, and you won't like it." That sounds even more ominous of a threat.
Yeah.
That's what evidently Christian Cooper said to her, according to Christian Cooper, because we don't have a video record of it. And Jane MC also says she did get her dog back at least. That's one thing I don't know if I mentioned, but she was pressured to surrender her dog because, the pending investigation or something like that. So, yeah, I watched that whole thing. I've read about other people who've had problems like this before. One woman had she didn't have very many Twitter followers, and she made some kind of, and it was a mean joke. She made a mean joke on Twitter, and some high-profile media figure decided to make her famous and pointed out her tweet in a very public way. Now it's public. So all he did was point his mob of people at her tweet. And all of a sudden it starts trending on Twitter, and it's picked up and retweeted, and next thing you know, she's on a flight, has her phone off, and isn't even aware of what's going on because she's out of a cell range because she's in the air on a flight. And next thing you know, she lands, her phone blows up with all these notifications and missed calls, and her friend calls and asks if she's okay, or texts and asks if she's okay, because this whole thing is such a high-profile thing now. And she was completely unaware that it was even going on. That woman got fired from her job also. She ended up having to leave the country for 2 years until the fury died down. There were so many, it was unsafe for her to be inside the country.
That's amazing.
So this is the kind of thing that can destroy people's lives when these mobs out on the internet I have a problem with it. I don't like where we're headed as a society. And the media just fans the flames all the time. I'll tell you what, I got a call on the line from Washington State. Let's go ahead and take the call. And hello, caller, you're on the air. Hello.
Morning, Stu. Hey, Vicky, you talked a lot about, I believe it was Boise, Idaho, and you're wondering why it's called a port when it's not really on the salt water. I'm wondering, I was driving around last week, I don't get out much, but somebody was saying, boy, look at all these new warehouses, one after the other, thousands and thousands of square feet. And, hey, this is great. We're going to pick up the telephone or go to Amazon and order something across the country, and then the data will be transferred to the warehouse close to that location, and they'll send it on a truck and deliver it to your house. All the Monpas are eliminated, and I mentioned to the guy driving the car and how great these, he thought this warehouse thing was just the way it was going to be. I said, well, what about when there's autonomous truck drivers? What's the next generation exactly going to do when everything is eliminated? So, Vicky, have you ever heard of foreign trade zones of the United States?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
We've talked about it a lot of times on the show.
Yeah, that's what I actually started researching in Boise, and found out about they call them, foreign trade zones, but they start out as intermodal commerce zones, which actually turns out to be a port. They basically defined our interstate highway system as shipping lanes. And if your roadway goes from a seaport to or an international border, and ends up somewhere like Boise, it can end up being like a maritime route, and it becomes a port that is effectively like a seaport. It's something that they've done that it corresponds to the communist Chinese Belt and Road project, only they didn't call it Belt and Road until, I think it was 2013, but it's under the same system, the global transportation system. So the zone where you have one of these ports becomes kind of like an international zone. And if you look at the structure of the global economy, the idea for globalization is that these cities are the new centers of power, city-states. And effectively, structurally, what it looks like to me is that that's the way they collapse countries, is by having all commerce run through the ports and like Grover Norquist said, getting the federal government so small that they could drown it in a bathtub. Well, the way they structured these trade agreements and the way that they have designed our economy, our country, it has turned out to be that to make the federal government so small that it could be drowned in a bathtub. And we can see it unraveling right now.
Anything else?
And where are the centers of power? You've got Chicago, New York, all of the cities that are connected to the global transportation system. And you're right about those businesses, those big warehouses. Those jobs are horrendous, and those people will be replaced with automation also.
Yep. Brian, you got anything else?
And so I was going to mention I was at the WTO battle in Seattle 30 years ago, and we need to keep this in mind when people are in the streets as we speak, that some of this resistance has to happen. And
yeah, but you know what? I really wish they would direct it in the right way. If they were directing it in the right way, I'd be out there with them. But the problem is the design of our economy within the global system. They have destroyed our economy. And it's the economy for everybody, not just, there are no privileged people except the billionaires and the people that work for the billionaires.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I have... Go ahead.
When Larkin, Texas says, I really don't want any of this technology in my world, I'm looking at a Amazon warehouse burning as we speak. This fire is massive, 600,000 square feet. It is got 20 solar panels that are burning on the roof. It says it has 10 miles of automated conveyor belts and thousands of robots. So embracing this technology or resisting it, I think the choice is pretty clear to me.
Well, they'll build it back. They'll build it back. But the thing is that it's going to take time. And, some of the businesses, the well-funded ones, will build back. The technology's not going away, however. And they'll find more efficient ways to do things, and they'll just build it back better in accordance with their new technology.
But you know what? There has to be a fundamental rethinking of what is the purpose of business? What is the purpose of a country? What do they expect people to do? The idea of sending people a monthly check for subsistence, that's not going to make it. You can't do that. You can't do that to people. You can't just say you're a disposable commodity. Here's your check, and here's your food stamp card. get out of here. You can't do that.
I think that's what's going to happen.
Especially to young people, you cannot do that.
I think that's what's going to happen. Ultimately, this will be placated, and this will be probably reparations for slavery. I could see that coming down the pipe.
Well, it all has to be a payoff to somebody to keep them quiet, but that does not fix the economy.
Yeah. Hey, Brian,
I
I'm going
don't
to
think
move on.
we would have
appreciate the
nearly
call.
all those problems if we would fix the economy and make the country function for the people of the country and not for business.
Yeah. By the way, if anybody wants to call in, you're welcome to do so. We'll open up the phone lines for everyone, 610-600-1776. If you got something you'd like to add. I know these are eventful times, and I'm sure people have things that they would like to talk about. 610-600-1776, or you can call toll-free 844-646-8376. That's 844-6-GOVERN. Moving along here, I got another victim. That we just played the woman who was walking through the grocery store. There was a little bit more to that clip, but I went ahead and dumped it because it'll be in the show notes if somebody wants to see the entire thing. Because she went on to make the point that one of the brothers, as she put it, one of the brothers pulled a gun on her because she was trying to clean up the trash. She was trying to clean up the garbage because she said there's garbage everywhere. She says the cops didn't pull a gun on me, he did. So there's some real problems there. But if anybody wonders, if anybody had any doubt who's really being hurt here, it is the people who are black that live in these neighborhoods. And to be fair, I saw a number of white people that were looting. So these people are being brought in. We know they're being bussed in everywhere. They're being bussed in to right where, right outside. I live outside of a town, and I work in another town. Lansing, East Lansing, that area, Jackson, that area, they're being bussed in. They were being bussed into Grand Rapids.
Yeah,
so we know
the police should know who they are, right? I mean, you can't just drive buses to places and not leave a trail.
Well,
paper trail.
I don't know who's controlling the buses, but certainly,
the police can find out. Certainly.
Well, generally speaking, whenever you have one of these operations that are this big, some intelligence agency would have to know something. I mean, my goodness, whenever they have any kind of movement whatsoever, especially an insurgent movement like this, they have to have undercover officers embedded. They have to. There's no way you can have an operation this big without having intel on it. I'm not buying this, Vicky. I'm not buying the bull crap that, we're just kind of, we're a bunch of stooges. They've been hiding behind that for years. It's like 9/11. Supposedly we got hit by all these Arabs with box cutters that were so inept that they couldn't fly a plane. They had to take flight manuals with them to the airport. They were so stupid, that they couldn't, find their rear end with a compass and a map. And yet, we didn't see them. Well, we never knew it was coming.
Right.
And we got NORAD patrolling the skies.
Sophisticated crime probably ever committed.
Yeah, NORAD patrolling the skies, and we had no idea. Hogwash. So I don't buy that.
Well, it's our government. Our government stood down. Our government has been standing down, is still standing down. I don't know if it's because it is collapsing or.
I think it's collapsing.
I think it is like a controlled demolition of our government.
We're being transitioned. We're being transitioned into a police state dictatorship. That's what I think is going on here. Ultimately, there will be a synthesis come out of this dialectical clash. But in the meantime, there's going to be a number of people, a number of innocent people hurt. And that is really the tragedy of all of this.
You and so many others are going through such a rough time. How was last night?
scary. I live in the high-rise right back here, and I seen them as they came down Lake Street. But then they turned and started coming over here, and I'm sitting out looking out my window. And they went straight to Office Max, the dollar store, and every store over here that I go to. I have nowhere to go now. I have no way to get there because the buses aren't running. These people did this for no reason. It's not going to bring George back here. George is in a better place than we are. And last night, I'm going to be honest, I wish I was where George was because this is ridiculous. These people are tearing up our livelihood. This is the only place I could go to shop. And now I don't have anywhere to go. I don't have anywhere to get there.
I know you mentioned, being in your home. What's that?
I said the poor lady, God.
Yeah, and there's so many of them just like that. That, a lot of them, poverty's the problem, okay? So they're in an impoverished neighborhood as it is, don't have transportation, and all the stores are now tore up. So they can't go buy groceries, they can't go... the situation has been exponentially worse by these rioters. And the overwhelming majority, and I'll tell you what, I don't know how many people... Vicky, you touched upon it last week. The immigrants... and I won't call them immigrants, the people that were brought into this country, many of them are, I think, illegals. But evidently, Minneapolis has a huge population of foreigners that have been brought in that, the question is, how many of these people are taking part in this destruction because their whole culture in their home country has been that way.
That's a good point. It's hard to say, but it is surprising, I have to say, that it's Minneapolis, because that's kind of like heartland America. But one thing, I did find out a little bit about the circumstances, the location where George Floyd was murdered. It turns out that it's in an industrial zone that was being redeveloped, and the nightclub, the policeman who killed George Floyd and George Floyd both worked for a nightclub,
right?
That was called Nuevo Rancho or something like that.
Okay.
And it happens to be that industrial zone is on an old highway on the road to the airport. Oh. Okay? The significance of that
it's an international zone.
That road is probably... on the Defense Highway Network system.
Interesting.
Because the Defense Department has a highway system for defense purposes, that pre-existed, I guess, the interstate, or maybe it just includes the interstate. I'm not quite certain. But the roads to and from transportation systems to city centers, to the population centers, are defense highways. And so there may be something there, for somebody to look at in terms of military involvement in those areas.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's the name of the defense highway system, I think, is StrawNet. I have it documented in one of the things that I wrote. But they are as involved in the global transportation system, and maybe more involved since it's international, than domestic entities. Mm-hmm. Okay, now the ports being ports, that the Coast Guard was involved. They brought in the Coast Guard to be oversight or something to do with those ports, because the Coast Guard is kind of a hybrid. They're kind of military, but they are also domestic law enforcement. So they are a hybrid that crosses the boundary of posse comitatus, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's all very, very interesting.
And when Hillary Clinton was the Secretary of State, she got, I think it was 7,000 visas for transit workers, transportation workers. Now, what does the Secretary of State need with transportation worker visas for the United States?
That's a good question.
And that goes to what you were saying about that Minneapolis, St. Paul.
I want to say Somali immigrants.
I think it is Somalis, yes.
Yeah.
I've flown through there a couple of times. It's like being in a foreign country.
Yeah, and the question is, did they import all of these people from all of these areas around the world for this very purpose, to cause this type of civil unrest? I think it's very plausible.
I do too.
People are being used as weapons in the war against our country.
Well, and there was a system designed for it with the EB-5 visa and economic development.
Right.
It's almost, I was thinking about it yesterday, and it's what I would call constructive fraud, because we have an economic development system set up where the Treasury gives money to the community development banks. The community development banks carry out economic development in your community. Well, they also have EB-5 centers where they can sell American citizenship for money for economic development. And so what they've done is they've incentivized, basically bought off local officials to be able to massively import people, where countries can set up a so-called investor, and he can pass money to our local officials legally and build a business, and then the business can then import all of the people, all of the foreigners that they want to work at that business.
Yeah, and that happens all the time. And and I hate to say it, but some of the Trump kids have been promoting this, marketing it.
Absolutely. His daughter is totally behind workforce development, and Jared Kushner apparently has made a lot of his money on EB-5 visas.
Yes. Jared Kushner should have never been in the White House. Neither should Ivanka. Talk about
right. I wish people would look into that, because it's like a circular kind of system where they bring in lots of refugees. And, of course, that drops the income level. The area then meets the criteria for a poverty pocket, or, they call it a T-zone. I forget what that is. An employment zone. And then they get economic development in, where they can build businesses, but then they bring in, they employ refugees, but then they go through the whole same cycle. So your local connected officials are making tons of money on this, while the local taxpayers, they're on the hook for infrastructure building for the massive new population that's coming in, the schools, the extra police, the fire, the whole infrastructure the local taxpayers are on the hook for it, while the local public officials are benefiting from it.
Mm-hmm.
It's constructive fraud.
Yes, absolutely.
By design.
Absolutely.
Yeah, by design.
Moving along here. Here in Michigan, by the way, Grand Rapids was one of the first towns that was destroyed, looted and destroyed. There was a nice lady that stood outside of her employer's shop. The windows had been broken out, but she was trying to keep the looters away. I thought this was kind of an instructive moment.
Like they were breaking the windows, and people did try to jump in and steal the little lamps. A couple of them did, but we got them back and we put them in. A couple of people tried to jump in and go in, but we stopped them. I'm just trying to stop people from making it any worse, even though I know there's not much we can do at this point. But I work here. These are good people. They don't deserve this, so this isn't what we came down here for. We came down here for a peaceful protest, not to hurt the community and the people that have worked hard for these businesses. So we're just trying to do our best to stop it.
Did you come down here to check on your store, or
no? Not at all. We just happened to be walking by, and we saw people breaking it as we were walking by. And I tried to run across and stop them, but she didn't want me to, just because there was a bunch of people, and she didn't want me to get hurt. But we were luckily able to scare them off. So just by telling them that we work here, I work here, it really helps a lot of people stop. So far, we've been letting everyone know that I work here, and they're leaving alone. They're being respectful for the most part. Now that they see that real people work here and people need these jobs to pay their bills and survive, and this business was about to open back up. They were trying to open back up for us. And now, obviously, they're not going to be able to.
Now you can hear they're still breaking the glasses of the other shops while they're talking on the street.
So this is the street where your store is, and you can see that there's a lot of looting happening. I mean,
a lot of looting. I can't protect every business. I can just try to help as much as I can for the owners of this business. Just really hoping the cops will get down here soon and try to stop this. These people don't deserve this. Like, it's only hurting us. People work their whole lives for these businesses. And I'm just going to try to stay here for as long as I can. Oh my God, stop! No! Not me! Helping our cause at all.
We started on a knee with peace signs in the air.
We were here to stop the violence and stop all of this, and we're causing more. People are causing more of it. This is exactly what we weren't supposed to do. All this does is hurt our community, where we live, where we work. So hope the cops get here soon.
I hope the cops get here soon. Now, you know, the irony of it is that this is a protest against the cops.
Right.
You know, and she's one of the protesters. And so, you know, and she's a nice lady, obviously, you know, very brave, standing in front of the shop with the windows busted out, trying to keep people from looting her employer. But, you know, I couldn't help but point out the irony of the whole situation. These protesters are anti-police. They want to defund the cops in many cases. They want the cops done away with, apparently. But yet, when they get into trouble, when they have violence, when they have a circumstance they need dealt with, they're the first to call 911. They're the first to say, "I hope the cops get here soon."
Yeah, it is.
This thing is really bothersome to me. That the war on police, and I'm the first. I would say that I do not like police brutality. We've talked a lot on this program over the years about police brutality and the fact that it's gotten out of hand in many cases. I think largely the federalization of the police force certainly has not helped things. Many of these cops, if not all, most of them, all of them maybe, go over to Israel for training. And so they are being trained in militaristic...
and so they learn how to deal with the Palestinians. Great idea.
Yeah, then we had the Jade Helm exercise back in 2015, which seemed to be preparing us for this type of situation. Isn't it interesting? 5 years ago. You know, they were
preparing us for
what's going on now.
Stand down.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is, too. It's disgusting to see what's going on. And standing down, you're right, that's exactly what's going on. You got Seattle Council member Tammy Morales, And she's scratching her head, Vicky. She can't understand why all this looting is bothering people.
People are willing to help do those repairs, and I'm extremely thankful that nobody was injured there. But what I don't want to hear is for our constituents to be told to be civil, not to be reactionary, to be told that looting doesn't solve anything. And, it does make me wonder and ask the question why looting bothers people so much more than knowing that across the country, Black men and women are dying every day and far too often at the hands of those who are sworn to protect and serve.
I just don't understand why looting would bother people. Why does it bother people?
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Well, and I've heard news people say that the statistics that they're giving, or the impression that they're giving of, the Black community being under attack by the police just simply isn't true. The statistics don't bear it out.
Well, they're under attack by these insurgents that are coming into their neighborhoods right now, supposedly trying to help them. That's who they're under attack.
Yeah, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just in general.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. But they need to realize who the real enemy is, and it's not the people they think it is. Here's New York Governor Cuomo was responding to criticism by President Trump. And he acknowledged there evidently must be some bad blood between him and Mayor Bill de Blasio. But
I don't know how you couldn't have bad blood with Bill de Blasio. He's such an idiot. I'm sorry, go ahead.
But Cuomo acknowledged that Bill de Blasio didn't do his job. He also said that even though he didn't want to do it, he actually raised the specter of overthrowing the mayor if necessary.
First, the NYPD and the mayor did not do their job last night. I believe that. Second, you have 38,000 NYPD people. It is the largest police department in the United States of America. Use 38,000 people and protect property. Use the police, protect property and people. Look at the videos. It was a disgrace. I believe that. I believe the mayor underestimates the scope of the problem. I think he underestimates the duration of the problem. And I don't think they've used enough police to address the situation, because it's inarguable, but that it was not addressed last night, right? So, facts, okay? This is a glass of water. This is not a glass of milk. It's a fact. There's still facts in life. What happened in New York City was inexcusable. Well, the governor should use the National Guard in New York City. I've offered the National Guard. The mayor has said he can handle it with the NYPD. My option is to displace the mayor of New York City and bring in the National Guard as the governor in a state of emergency and basically take over. You would have to take over the mayor's job. You'd have to displace the mayor, right? A, I don't think we're at that point. B, that would be such a chaotic situation in the midst of an already chaotic situation. I don't think that makes any sense. I understand the president's political point.
What do you think of that?
I am surprised that Trump would step out of line like that. He doesn't have the authority to remove a mayor. The governor might be able to.
No, that
do
wasn't
something.
Trump. That was Cuomo.
Yeah, it was Cuomo. But Trump, didn't he say that, or didn't you say that Trump said he would remove the mayor?
No, Cuomo is saying he could remove the mayor. Cuomo is saying Cuomo could remove the mayor.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, he should.
Well, yeah, he should, because let me tell you right now, his daughter, Bill de Blasio's daughter, was arrested at a Manhattan protest on
Did you
Saturday
see a
night.
picture of her? She looks like a psycho. She looks crazy as heck.
Yeah, she's one of
Her
those.
eyes are crazy.
Yeah, she's one of them. Her name is Chiara de Blasio. She's a 25-year-old. She was taken into custody at 10:30 on Saturday night a week ago. I guess she was violating the order, the curfew, which ironically was set by her father. So very obedient child. But why is she like that? Well, when you hear his response, it's not really hard to imagine how she turned out that way.
Shine through when we get the bad apples off this police force. My final point before turning to Commissioner Shea. As has been reported, my daughter Chiara was arrested at a protest. I want you first to know, and I think many, many parents can appreciate this, she's 25 years old. Did not inform Shirlane and I of her intention to get arrested. I knew of some of her views. I knew she believed in peaceful protest. I knew she had participated a few nights ago, but in a peaceful manner. And when I found out she had been arrested, finally reached her with Shirlane, and we asked her to recount the whole story. And look, I love my daughter deeply. I honor her. She is such a good human being. She only wants to do good in the world. She wants to see a better and more peaceful world. She believes a lot of change is needed. I'm proud of her that she cares so much that she was willing to go out there and do something about it. She recounted the story in detail to me. She was acting peacefully. She believes that everything she did was in the spirit of peaceful, respectful protest. And the bottom line is I will let her speak for herself in any way that she wants to, but I admire that she was out there trying to change something that she thought was unjust and doing it in a peaceful manner. It's a reality that every parent faces, that you never know when your kids become adults how they're going to go about their lives. Sometimes you get surprises. But even though this was a surprise to Shirlane and I respect my daughter, I honor her, and I know her heart. I know she appreciates humanity, every kind of humanity. She appreciates the fact that people serve us. She appreciates the fact that we need to change this world, and she, in her own way, has tried to do something about it. And for that, I want to just tell her how much I love and respect and admire her.
Okay, so there you go.
Well, I just have no words.
Well, and it gets even worse because, Minnesota governor's daughter, Hope Walsh. Now, we talked about the party the Minnesota governor is a part of. It sounds very, very communistic. Tim Walsh, let me just get back to it again. He is with Democratic Farmer Labor Party. So it sounds like a very communistic party, to me anyway. Anyway, his daughter just was actually tweeting out intelligence to violent looters and daughters, violent looters and rioters, and that along with Ilhan Omar's daughter, Isra Hersey. Evidently, according to the Gateway Pundit, they say we knew from recent rallies and riots that it's highly likely the groups behind today's riots are domestic terrorists. Highly likely. I think I said unlikely. I'm sorry. Let me start over. We knew from recent rallies and riots that it's highly likely the groups behind today's riots are domestic terrorists, revolutionary communists, U.S.-based radical Islamist organizations, and others related to the Democratic Party. Today, we have more proof this is the case. We reported a few days ago that Minnesota Representative Ilhan Omar's daughter tweeted out support for the protesters. Minnesota Democratic Representative Ilhan Omar's daughter, Isra Hersey, retweeted a list of supplies for comrades who are rioting in Minneapolis. Isra Hersey is the co-founder of the U.S. Youth Climate Strike, and her Twitter bio says she, quote, hates capitalism, Vicky.
Huh. Gee, that's a surprise.
There's a clue for you.
Actually, see, that's where they don't understand. We don't actually have capitalism anymore. We have a centrally planned economy, and it was, like Steve Bannon always likes to say, it was planned decline. They're dropping our standard of living to equal the lowest levels. So they shouldn't be thinking that they're protesting against capitalism, because this is not it.
Right. But it resembles enough of capitalism that they want every shred of any semblance of the free market destroyed.
Well, they're believing the propaganda, and the thing is that anybody that's going to go out and destroy things or participate in any kind of violence, you better understand what the real issues are so that you know that you're on the right side. And I doubt that I would be surprised if there's even a small fraction of those people that are out there on the street that understand anything real about what's going on in our country. They're just like parrots. As a matter of fact, there was a video of an event up in northern Idaho where a guy was acting like a cheerleader, and he would say something. You remember the Simon Says game when you were a little kid? It was like They were doing the Simon Says. The guy with his megaphone would say something, Black Lives Matter, and then the whole crowd would say, Black Lives Matter, just parroting what he said.
Yeah, that was happening during the Occupy movement as well. It was very bizarre. It was almost like a cult ritual. As a matter of fact, I think I might have the audio of the event you were talking about. They were all gathered together just to set the stage. They were all gathered together. No social distancing.
In a line. It was like, to me, it was like they were just tall kindergartners.
Well, these weren't in a line.
And they're playing Simon Says.
They were all bunched together, crowded together. No social distancing, by the way. Just to point that out, because all this virtue signaling about, we all have to be careful because we might catch the disease. Yeah, no social distancing. But anyway, they're all crammed together. They got their hands in the air, Vicky, like people do at church.
Well, Simon Says, raise your hands.
Well, it's like they're worshiping Baphomet or something. They got their hands in the air, and they're repeating like a bunch of mindless zombies everything the guy from the platform is saying.
About racism, anti-blackness, or violence. About racism, anti-blackness, or violence.
Now, I want to interrupt this real quick. I'll get back to it in a second. I also wanted to say the majority of people in this thing, now, they're all together. They're all got their hands in the air. And most of them are dressed in black. That's the case, too. Most of them are dressed in black.
I will use my voice in the most uplifting way possible. I will use my voice in the most uplifting way possible. And do everything in my power to educate my community. And do everything in my power to educate my community. I will love my black neighbors the same as my white ones. I will love my black neighbors the same as my white ones.
It was creepy looking.
Yeah. Well, it is creepy. I mean, when you have people repeating back like that, it's I don't know. It's just so foreign, such a foreign concept to me that you would get adults to do that kind of stuff.
Social engineering. Anyway, getting back to this insurgent communist thing that's going on. These people tweeting out. By the way, where's the Twitter censors? They're organizing violent mobs to loot businesses and destroy things. And yet Twitter lets it all go. Twitter just lets it all go.
And our politicians let Twitter go.
Well, Trump has signed an executive order that is purporting to try to get this under control, the censorship part of it anyway, while they're censoring conservatives. That's one thing I didn't cover last week, but he has signed an executive order. Where that's going to go, I don't know how it's going to be enforced. But seems to be a positive step in the right direction, except that one thing I'm a little concerned about is this seems like it empowers the FCC to a certain extent. That worries me a little bit because I don't want the FCC regulating speech on the Internet. That's a little worrisome, because I don't want them turning the Internet into what they've turned terrestrial radio into, where fines can be issued and things like that. So that'll be something to watch in the coming days. But anyway,
well, it's a sticky problem.
Yes.
Because the Internet really is out of control and free speech is being abused.
Yeah, I do think their Section 230 protection should be revoked because they're publishers. They're not independent platforms like the phone company where, anytime you intervene, all of a sudden you become a publisher. Their liability should be intact. They should not have protection from liability in that case.
I think they should be broken up like AT&T was broken up.
Yeah, I do too.
They're just too big.
I do too. Anyway, this Isra Hirsa, she's the co-founder of the U.S. Youth Climate Strike, and her Twitter bio says she hates capitalism. Isra Hirsa retweeted a post from Twin Cities DSA, that is the Democratic Socialists of America. Want to help out your comrades protesting at the 3rd Precinct at Lake and Minnehaha? Here's a good list of much-needed supplies, except for milk. Water is always better for eye washing than milk. Please don't bring milk. So, they say when the 17-year-old radical leftist got called out by a reporter, Andy, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, NGO, she responded with a snarky comment. She says, yes, I'm an empathetic person. Sue me.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think she is.
But similar tweets, they say, supporting the rioters were being tweeted by Minnesota Democratic Governor Tim Walz's daughter, Hope Walz. She later deleted her account. This appears to be how Democrats and Islamists are communicating instructions regarding the riots through their children. So, if you want to know, if you want to have a clue as to why these people are not being stopped, maybe it's because they're going right along with it. Maybe it's because everything that's going on is exactly what they want to have going on.
Well, it does benefit them, doesn't it, if they can profit from it. And I've heard it said, I've read it, that it's the children of the elite that are leading these things. And it does kind of make sense, if you understand the economics underlying it and the power underlying it. So,
yeah, Portland mayor tweets excuses for rioting, and he's making excuses. The mayor, his name is Ted Wheeler. He says, I wanted to share some of the difficulty but necessary conversations I've had with friends, colleagues, and partners in our black community. We talked about the moment we are in, that the rioting we are seeing is a direct response to years of systemic injustice. And we can debate that for sure. We talked about agitation, yes, even violent agitation, and how it has historically occurred with purpose and resulted in change that has moved this country forward. We talked about educational disparities, health disparities, housing disparities, employment disparities, all placing the black community at a worsening disadvantage. We talked about why we must center the black community. Black votes must be elevated. When we are talking about impact, when we are talking about restorative justice, when we are
2 for 1? They get 2 votes, we get 1.
Apparently. I'll tell you what, we're at the top of the hour. We'll continue on the other side. Time's going by very quickly, but I think this is important. What we're experiencing, ladies and gentlemen, is nothing short of a communist revolution. Make no mistake about that.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
The councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
All right, hold on for a second. I'm having a little problem with something. Stand by, folks. Those that are listening to the repeat. All right, I'll tell you what. We're going to continue on with the show. Unfortunately, Vicky, we are off the air for the live stream. Now, I'm going to continue to do the show. For some reason, I can't get it back up because we're having some problems.
When did that happen? What happened?
I just found out about it a moment ago. Nobody's mentioned anything, so I'm assuming it just happened.
Okay. Huh.
But we have people that rebroadcast the show, and this is not something that's... I I'm having some real problems getting getting the live streams back up. So that's interesting. It is just not working. I'm not sure what's going on here.
You think we might be being censored?
I have no... Okay, now I think it finally came back up. So I'm going to have to call... I'm going to have to get a hold of tech support. I think we're back on the air now. So for those that were listening to the replay, yes, I see the numbers climbing now. For those that were listening to the replay later on, you'll have to bear with us. We were off the air a moment ago. And for those that are listening live, and for the stations, well, I don't even know if they're still connected because there was literally no stream there. But, we were talking about the fact that our country is under attack by communist revolutionaries, and coincidentally, we go off the air. So I'm going to assume it was a coincidence. Certainly, this is not something we haven't said before. And I want to come back to this situation, Vicky. I mentioned last week the Jan Kozak book, and Not a Shot is Fired. Jan Kozak and his co-conspirators had manipulated the Czechoslovak people into voting themselves into slavery by using what he called pressure from above and pressure from below. Not unlike Mussolini and Hitler had done earlier, the Czechoslovak communists were able to throw off a freely elected government and impose dictatorship by using certain levers of government power in coordination with targeted mass agitation. Very similar to the mass agitation that we're seeing going on right now. And I would assert some of these mayors and their children who are socialists and retweet things from the Democratic Socialists of America, that would be the pressure from above. And you have these grassroots, seemingly grassroots anyway, or agitation going on, pressure from below. You have all these mobs taking place. They talk about, though, this book, and it's a very short booklet, but it's a manuscript, and Not a Shot is Fired, not the original title, but this is what he put together to tell how they did it in Czechoslovakia. Mm-hmm. As a message for future communists to repeat the model in other free societies, free places where you have free governments. I'm trying to not to use the phrase open society. But they talk about how Parliament can play a revolutionary part in the transition to socialism and the role of popular masses. They talk about patriotism, a difficulty for the proletarian revolution. They talk about Parliament as an instrument of the socialist revolution. The Communist Party consolidates its influence, changing the social structure. They say of the economic measures, the following were the most important: the transfer of all enemy property of the treacherous upper bourgeoisie and of the other traders to the national administration of the new People's Authority, the transfer of the land belonging to these enemies and traders to the ownership of landless persons, tenants, and working smallholders. The principal foreign policy task was unequivocal alliance with the Soviet Union, safeguarding national liberty and independence as a state, and further undisturbed, peaceful development for the nations of Czechoslovakia. All these measures, aiming at far-reaching changes in the social structure of the country, emanated directly from the conditions and tasks of the anti-fascist. Does that sound familiar? National and democratic fight for liberation, and arose from the old democratic traditions and longing for the people, and they, furthermore, deepened and safeguarded that democracy. One of the tasks of Czechoslovak workers' class set itself in the struggle for the national and democratic interests of the people was to, therefore, the reestablishment of the institution of Parliament, which the occupiers had abolished, aided by the treacherous domestic upper bourgeoisie and traditions, which had deep roots among the people. Anyway, they talk about how they have the slogans and popularizing, let me see in here, Parliament provides pressure from above, from capitalism to socialism by means of Parliament, the combination of pressure from above and that from below, one of the elementary conditions for the revolutionary use of Parliament. I'm trying to find a certain place in here. Suppressing the counter-revolution, isolating the bourgeoisie. Step 2, popularizing revolutionary demands. The second prong of the pressure from above successfully employed by our workers' class was the use made of the organs holding powers, the government, parliament, national committees, for bringing about a wide popularization of revolutionary demands and slogans. So, for instance, the government approved the program of building, elaborated by the communists, which in its substance was a program for the further transformation of the democratic revolution into a socialist one. Its passage was of immense importance, since the program of the next economic political measures for advancing the revolution, elaborated by the communists, became the program of the entire government. This later enabled the workers' class to uncover all attempts made by the bourgeoisie at thwarting it as evidence of the anti-people treacherous policy of the bourgeoisie and to isolate its political exponents. At the same time...
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Would you say that the healthcare / public health system has become the mission of the government? And would that fit the description you just gave?
I would say so. And I would say it certainly is a mission of a communist revolutionary when you have... Because everything is controlled by healthcare, Vicky. If they can control healthcare, they can control human behavior.
That's true. The environment. Mm-hmm. That's how this whole public health agenda... the radicals came by way of environmental health out of the environmental movement.
Yeah, they talk about popularizing revolutionary demands. Later on, use of national mass organizations. And they talk about the, like the Revolutionary Trade Union Movement, the United Revolutionary Trade Union Movement, the unions. Mm-hmm. Use of protests, demonstrations, and strikes. Does this sound familiar?
Yeah. I just forget what I was looking at, but I did find that the ILO, the International Labor Organization, was involved. I'll have to find that and put it in the show notes. I'm not sure when I'll be able to do that. But the ILO, the International Labor Organization, is very much involved in this whole communist Marxist movement.
Yeah, they say in here, under the heading of use of protests, demonstrations, and strikes, the second experience gained in the struggle from below is the many-sided use of the paper forms of pressure exerted by the popular masses. These forms corresponded to the complicated class situation and the conditions prevailing under the people's democratic order, when the workers' class assumed power but the bourgeoisie still kept part of the power. On the one side, all the old proven forms of the struggle of the popular masses were employed, the forms which were in keeping with the revolutionary initiative and determination of the workers, and matched the degree of resistance shown by the bourgeoisie, calling of protests, meetings, passing of resolutions, sending of delegations, organizing mass demonstrations, and also eventually using strikes, including general strikes, when finally the open political clash with the bourgeoisie was brought about in February 1948. The strength and striking power of the individual actions of the pressure from below were constantly increased as need arose and were safeguarded by exceptional organizational forms. An especially prominent role was played in this by the Congress of Factory Councils and the Congresses of Peasants' Commissions, when the political crisis was resolved in Slovakia in the autumn of 1947, and the struggle for nationalization of private capitalist enterprises with over 50 employees and the entire domestic and foreign wholesale business, when the demand was pressed home for land reform above 50 hectares. And see, here it is, Vicky. This is very important. Demand was pressed home for land reform above 50 hectares. And when the political crisis was settled in February 1948, I would assert what you're going to see in the coming days, as this plays out, you're going to see people making the argument that people should not be able to make over a certain amount of money. Already I've heard that argument.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it came up during the Occupy Wall Street that the banksters, the institutional banksters and the Wall Street people and the CEOs, and you know what? The thing is that I kind of agree in a way that a CEO should not be paid hundreds of times more than the lowest paid worker. I think in the 1950s it was like 5 times or 10 times whatever the lowest paid worker was. And it really got way out of control when the whole era of greed started.
Yeah.
Well, and what they did with their newfound power of money is that they basically extracted the wealth out of our country.
They will always have
just
ways.
Like poking a hole in the boat. They just, they sunk our boat.
Yeah, they will always have ways around the controls they put in place for everybody else, however. So, make no mistake about it, if America flips to a communist country, Soros is still going to have his billions.
Oh, sure.
Bill Gates is still going to have his billions. Jeff Bezos will still have his billions. It's just none of the slaves underneath will ever be able to achieve more than the allotted amount. Essentially private property will be a thing of the past. But
because we don't have an honest government. We don't have an honest government, and they don't try to solve problems honestly. They solve problems for themselves. They're working for themselves as free agents, and so all of the programs of government, for the economy, all serve their interests in a roundabout sort of way.
So I recommend people get this booklet. I think you still can get it. I know an anonymous listener sent us a copy of it, I think from a couple of different locations by email. So it is even available online as text online. But it's not a very big book, but it's chock full of information about how they flipped Czechoslovakia into a communist country. And I see the parallels here. It's stunning. It's stunning.
I think that's why the communists really keep their people in line. There can be no independent thinking because they have a pre-written playbook. And I was thinking about the call to, defund the police, get rid of the police. Well, isn't that Gramsci's marching through the institutions? And the institutions that they're trying to march through now is law enforcement, is the police departments.
Yeah.
And so when you have a communist takeover of your police department, you're doomed. You're doomed.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, since you're talking about it, let's just jump to this. This is the L.A. Mayor, Eric Garcetti. He's announcing cuts to the LAPD.
With Council President Neri Martinez, with Council members Herb Wesson, Marquise Harris Dawson, and Curran Price, and so many other members of the Council, from Mike Bonin to Mitch O'Farrell and others, we have all said we have to do something different. We hear what people are saying. And so I have instructed and committed to, in public to that group, that our city, through our city administrative officer, identified $250 million in cuts so we could invest in jobs, in health, in education, and in healing. And that those dollars need to be focused on our black community here in Los Angeles, as well as communities of color and women and people who have been left behind for too long. And will this involve cuts? Yes, of course, to every department, including the police department, because we all have to be a part of this solution together.
So while we have all these riots and civil unrest going on, rather than give the police more funding, more resources with which to work, we're going to cut the police force so that the criminals and lawbreakers can be free to reign. Now, if they're not awake yet about what a setup this situation is, I don't know what could... I mean, you're just dead, basically.
Brain dead.
Brain dead. Absolutely.
Walking brain dead.
If you're not woke, you're not unwokeable. Okay? Unbelievable. But yeah, all this is going on. And what do we have with, these bricks being delivered in places? Did you hear about this?
Yes, I did. And I don't believe that they can't trace who left those bricks there, who paid for it, and who delivered them, and everything about it.
Well, I've got some information about this. Let me start from the beginning, because this is important. Incidentally, Biden's staff is donating to a group that pays the bail in the riots. Biden staff members. We also know that Hollywood, certain members of Hollywood. What was the guy's name who did the Red Stars over Hollywood? I forget his name now. But he talked about the communist infiltration of Hollywood in a documentary.
Would that be Mel Gibson?
No, I think it was Red Skelton.
Oh, Red Skelton.
I'm thinking, okay, hold on. Maybe I can find this. We run it on the stream. Chat room, feel free to chime in if you can think of that. Anyway, he was talking about how, Ronald Reagan was one of the... Myron Fagan. It was Myron Fagan. That's who it was.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Red Stars over Hollywood.
And Red Ronnie was the one that did the whole privatization, which began the process of the disintegration of our government. I'm so ashamed that I voted for Reagan twice.
Well, anybody can make a mistake, and you did so unknowingly, as most people are still unknown. They still don't know what a traitor Reagan was. Many conservatives practically worship the ground that the guy walked on.
I know.
And they're doing the same thing with Donald Trump, basically equating him with Ronald Reagan, as if Ronald Reagan was something special. But there's an organization called The Appeal. Okay? The Appeal is... Let me just load this stuff up here. Give me just a second and bear with me, because I want to do a deep dive on these bricks being delivered. The Appeal has this article on their website. And it's theappeal.org. It says, defund the police now. More training, more equipment, and more officers will not stop police from killing black people. Okay? And I would just say, the more encounters you have with the police, the greater likelihood, and I don't care what your skin color is, the greater likelihood that you're going to get killed by the police. So your best solution for not getting killed by the police is to try to avoid having contact with the police. And how do you do that? You quit committing crimes. Okay? I find it interesting that very few of these people that they hold up with names that become high profile have a clean record. Because I think that, you would think, now there's been a few exceptions possibly, but most of the time there's things that you could point to, and you could say that, well, if they hadn't done this, maybe, they probably would be alive today. And there's, my theory is because the black people who don't commit the crimes, they typically are not having contact with law enforcement, and therefore they're still alive. So you never hear about them. And the same goes for white people. I'm not trying to just single out one race, but this is where it gets incendiary. It gets incendiary for black people, but white people can be killed by cops, and are, by the way. They are killed by cops, and you never hear about it. Okay? But I don't want to get lost in the race aspect of it, because it really isn't about race. It's about pitting us against each other, and it's about us, divide and conquer so that we don't realize who our enemy, our collective enemy, really is. We have a common enemy. Our country is being destroyed. It's being destroyed from within. That's the bottom line. And we're all, those people who are out there protesting, who are out there throwing things. I mean, it's fine to protest, but you need to know what, number one, you need to have a plan. What's your goal? What's your goal? To do away with the cops? What's your goal? You need to have a clearly set, defined, outlined goal before you hit the streets. You don't just protest for the sake of protesting. So that's number one. Focus on a specific set of things, and don't keep moving the goalpost. That's the other thing. Anyway, protests are erupting. They say in the appeal, protests are erupting across the U.S. in response to the killing of George Floyd. And, I don't think I have to, they go on and rehash. I don't think I need to do that. They say, just days after Floyd's brutal death, Mississippi Attorney General Lynn Fitch announced she would drop the manslaughter charges against Columbus police officer Kenyon Boykin, who killed Ricky Ball, a 26-year-old black man, in 2015. Skipping down here, they say convictions of officers involved in police shootings are rare. Okay, I'm trying to get to the point here. In 2016, the Columbus City... Okay, here we go. Let me back up. But how do we stop police killings of black people before they happen? 3 words: defund the police. Now, I just played a clip where the L.A. mayor is talking about how they're cutting the police. And they're going to take this money that they save from cutting the police and other agencies, he did include other agencies in that, and use that, reappropriate that money for essentially civil rights groups. And he didn't say civil rights, but that's what it sounded like to me. So-called, in other words, bureaucratic programs anyway, that he says is going to somehow help the black people. He's going to fund other bureaucracy.
We need the wall to run the length of California.
So they say defund the police. In 2016, the Columbus City Council spent $10.4 million, or about 48% of its general expenditures on public safety, which includes the police and fire departments. This funding was used for law enforcement salaries, training, and equipment. But none of this spending led to a safer Columbus. At the end of 2016, murder, robbery, and sex crimes were at their highest since 2012, according to Columbus Police Department statistics. More police officers with more training and more equipment did not decrease crime. So what are we talking about here? Defunding the police. This is the most... And Vicky, this is exactly at the same time that there is an anti-incarceration movement going on. They want to turn all the criminals loose and then at the same time cut the police department. This is engineered chaos.
The insanity of it is not something that you can even deal with in a rational conversation because it just makes no sense whatsoever. So you can't even debate it. There's nothing to debate. It's just freaking insane.
Well, here's the thing. This publication that's pushing this, The Appeal, on their About page, they say, we produce original journalism about criminal justice that engages the public and holds officials to account. We focus on the most significant drivers of mass incarceration, and there it is.
Mass incarceration is due to mass crime.
There you go. You know that. I know that. But somehow this thought has been lost. Somehow incarceration has become equated with a violation of civil rights.
Right. You know what? It's the dishonest media that doesn't tell the true story.
Well, it's even worse
and
than
our
the media.
government that doesn't publish the true statistics.
Yeah,
so there you go.
It's even worse, I'm afraid. This is nothing short of a very dangerous agenda. We focus on the most significant drivers of mass incarceration which occur at the state and local level. Nearly 1 in 4 Americans has a criminal record. Is that true?
I have no idea.
I don't know if that's... I question that one. That seems very high. That's what they say, though. Nearly 1 in 4 Americans has a criminal record, and state-level facilities hold 87% of America's incarcerated people. We draw on deep expertise to expose the human impact of our most routine criminal justice practices. The Appeal is an editorially independent project of the Justice Collaborative, which is a fiscally sponsored project of Tides Advocacy.
Tides Foundation?
Tides Advocacy. I'm assuming yes. It is connected.
You know what? I do think that the punishments for just about everything are too much. Way too much. It
depends on what the crime is.
If you throw a young person into jail for quite a long time with hardened criminals, you're going to get a hardened criminal back.
Well,
so
I don't know.
But that was Democrats that did that. So
I find it interesting. Reuters came out with an article back in 2011. Soros, not a funder of Wall Street protests. This is back when the Occupy movement was going on. They say in their effort to debunk the notion that George Soros is funding this stuff, they actually end up substantiating it. They say George Soros isn't a financial backer of the Wall Street protests despite speculation by critics, including radio host Rush Limbaugh, that the billionaire investor has helped fuel the anti-capitalist movement. Limbaugh summed up the chatter when he told his listeners last week Soros' money is behind this. Soros spokesman Michael Vacon said that Soros has not funded the protests directly or indirectly. He added assertions to the contrary are an attempt by those who oppose the protesters to cast doubt on the authenticity of the movement. Then they go on to say Soros has donated at least $3.5 million to an organization called the Tides Center. Now, what did we just say was that other one was Tides Advocacy?
Uh-huh.
Soros has donated at least and this is 2011. Soros has donated at least $3.5 million to an organization called the Tides Center in recent years, earmarking the funds for specific purposes. Tides has given grants to Adbusters, an anti-capitalist group in Canada whose inventive marketing campaign sparked the first demonstrations last month. So they go on to talk, in their effort to debunk it, they turn around and substantiate it. Okay? Now, I brought that up, and I've got the Form 990 of the Tides Advocacy Organization. They name as their principal officer Romilda Justilian. Okay? Romilda Justilian is the principal officer for the Tides Advocacy. Now, when you go to, and that was from GuideStar, when you go to her LinkedIn page, it says in here, Romilda Romy Justilian, Chief Executive Officer at Tides Advocacy, San Francisco, California. If I can spit it out here. And going down the page, this woman, it says back in June 2012 to August 2012, she was an employee, or actually was a graduate intern at the Center for Health Equity in Place, and it says that's based, I guess, in Oakland, California. With the Center for Health Equity and Place and Promise Neighborhood Institute, Ms. Justilian worked on a resource guide for promising practices around black men and boys for Promise Neighborhood grantees through funding from the Open Society Foundation's campaign for black male achievement. So this woman has got a history of working with Soros and his foundation. So I just thought that was noteworthy.
Yeah, I wrote an article where I was looking at all of the that were set up, and Tides was at the center of it. And if I recall correctly, the way that it works is that Tides basically allows the donors to be anonymous. So you can donate money to Tides, and then Tides will funnel the money to the organization that you specify, so that it all remains completely hidden.
harder to trace. Yeah,
right.
And if this was all above board, why have a go-between? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's really just a way around the law. You know, reporting on the 990, who is giving you money and for what purpose, you know?
Right, exactly. Now, if you go to Breitbart, they had an article out back in 2016, August 30th of 2016. Aaron Klein. Leaked memo reveals Soros' plan for federally controlled police. They say a leaked document from George Soros' Open Society Foundations exposes the billionaire's level of involvement in attempting to build what his organization describes as a quote-unquote national movement to reform local police forces across the U.S. The reform largely consists of federal guidelines for police forces. What have we been talking about here? We're going to cut police. Back in Baltimore we were discussing how they were pushing community-oriented policing services, cops, the COPS program, and so this is what we're dealing with now. We're hearing a lot of
bringing in your worst criminal element. You bring those into the police department so that you can get to understand each other.
Yes, and then that's where I was going next.
So they can work side by side together.
That's where I was going next, is they were talking about turning police into social workers, problem solvers. And police are problem solvers in many respects, but you can't deal with crime by sitting around a table and talking about it. I mean, some hardened criminals are not reformable. Many of them, and there are many reasons why crime is a problem. But anyway, the document, this leaked document, identifies an opportunity in the police killings of black men in Ferguson, Staten Island, North Charleston, and Baltimore. It relates that the U.S. contingent of Open Society held a planning meeting titled Police Reform, How to Take Advantage of the Crisis of the Moment and Drive Long-Term Institutional Change in Police Community Practice. The extensive memo further documents that Soros-financed groups and personalities influenced President Obama's task force on 21st century policing, which, at that time, last May, released a final report consisting of 60 recommendations providing guidance to localities on how to modify policing practices. So I will put this and the document in the show notes for people to peruse, because I think this is very, very germane to what's going on now. I don't have time to get deeply into it now because we're running out of time for the show today. And I still wanted to talk about this problem of these bricks popping up everywhere, because I also discovered some information about that. First of all, let's go ahead. As we said, in numerous locations in different cities, there were these pallets of bricks that were delivered and set conveniently for rioters to discover and use for their mayhem. There were many locations where this happened. These guys were, in this clip I'm about to play, they were from Dallas, and they discovered a pallet at the Dallas courthouse.
This right here?
Yeah, they put them there.
This the setup.
They put them there on purpose,
Y'all know where we at.
They gonna set them hoes right up on the rail.
Y'all know what building this is right here. I ain't even gonna say what name it is.
Hey, where do them bricks go to? Where do them bricks go to? Where do them bricks go to?
We gotta do better.
Ain't no damn construction.
Gotta do better.
Ain't no damn construction around here.
I see.
Ain't no damn construction around here. You just gonna set a pallet of bricks right there. Oh, okay.
Listen, I did jury duty 3 months ago. Y'all don't keep no bricks right there. Do better.
He said, I did jury duty, and there were no bricks there. There's no construction going on at these places where these bricks are being dropped off. It's fascinating to me about the bricks. What I discovered, Vicky, is the parent company of Acme Brick Company is Justin Industries. And I will put all the proof of this in the show notes. Justin Industries was acquired by Berkshire Hathaway in 2000. Care to take a guess on who was on the board of directors of Berkshire Hathaway until March of this year?
Who?
Bill Gates.
Oh. Yeah, they were good friends.
So Bill Gates has connections.
Actually, I think Warren Buffett kind of mentored Bill Gates.
Also, another interesting note, the Marmon Group of Chicago, which is an industrial holding company, is also a Berkshire Hathaway-owned company, and that was founded by J. and Robert Pritzker. Of course, the governor of Illinois is J.B. Pritzker. So I just thought that was an interesting, I don't know if it's relevant, but that little detail there I thought was pretty interesting for the record. It's like an incestuous type of situation, I think. But I've got a number of links there that I will put in the show notes. But with the officials promoting looting, with the officials promoting, and certainly even their family members being involved, there is a woman named Hannah Jones. She's the author of what's called the 1619 Project. And she was on with, what's her name? I'm drawing a blank on what the woman's name is. It's just on the tip of my tongue. But anyway, she was on one of these TV shows, and she's defending the looting. Here it is.
Well, you know,
the helplessness that
go ahead.
I was just going to say, globalization is anarchy from the top. Our government are anarchists from our system of government. So there you go.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, and they certainly capitalize upon anarchy, because whenever you want to rebuild, you have to first destroy. And I think we're in that destruction stage right now.
This sense of helplessness that we are a 13% minority in a majority white country. We are descendants of people who were enslaved in this country. And so ultimately, our protest is only as successful as we can convince white Americans to actually comply with the Constitution and treat black Americans as full citizens. I think I would not describe looting as violence. Looting is property damage, but it is not violence. And I would actually like to go to Martin Luther King's own words. He wrote a letter to the American Psychological Association in September of 1967. And what he said is that looting comes from the most enraged and deprived Negro, and it allows them to take hold of consumer goods with the ease that a white man does by using his purse. Often the Negro does not even want what he takes. He wants the experience of taking. Negroes have committed crimes, but they are the derivative crimes, and they are born of the greater crimes of the white society. So when we ask Negroes to abide by the law, let us also demand that the white man abide by the law in the ghettos as well. So I think we need to have some perspective on what exactly we're seeing when we call that violence and looting.
I think it's so interesting to hear you say this, and it really made me sit up when Darren said it, because
it's so interesting, Vicky.
That's what you say when you don't know what to say.
That's what you say when, if you open your mouth and agree with her, you're going to be roundly criticized. as well. You should be.
That was a lose-lose conversation. Either way she goes, she's going to lose.
Exactly. Well, so it's interesting to hear you say that.
This is how it's being framed, and I have to say that we are being, criticized by some very prominent members of the black community, from LeBron James to various people in Congress to all over, that we're focusing maybe on the wrong thing, that we go just to one area and not to the other area with our cameras and our lenses and our reporting. And it's really, really interesting to try to break it down. And I want to say, obviously, because you are the producer of the 1619 Project, 400 years since slavery in America, and you won the Pulitzer Prize for your work on that. And you've said, among other things, people who've been left out of the social contract find no need to adhere it. And then somebody sort of checked you on that and said not left out, excluded from the social contract. And you kind of agreed. You agreed with being, term checked, so to speak, on that.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the thing. You are asking people whose communities have been looted for decades, who don't have proper schools, who don't have proper amenities, who have been, when we see someone killed by the police, that is the worst manifestation of police violence. But it doesn't get to the daily police violence that doesn't end in death, the daily degradations that black Americans face. The fact that these communities have been preyed upon by predatory lenders. It goes on. And so when we think about how someone taking an act to take something from some big box name store, it is symbolic. That one pair of shoes that you've stolen from, Foot Locker is not going to change your life, but it is a symbolic taking. And so when we think about what the social contract was and who created it, it is that if you follow the rules, if you do the right things, then you will be able to access an equal society. And that has never been true for black Americans, and particularly for the lowest income, most segregated black Americans. So you cannot regularly not include them in the social contract, regularly violate the promises that this country makes to Americans, and then at this moment in time say, well, you should abide by the laws and the rules of our country because that's the right thing to do. There's no reason to expect that people who have regularly been left out will comply with this right now.
It's a symbolic taking when somebody loots a store.
That is so twisted.
Yeah, if I was a black man...
How could somebody sit with her and not call her on that? Theft is theft.
Why would
theft is theft.
Why would Christiane Amanpour was her name, the host? I couldn't think of her name a moment ago. Yeah, she's the host. But why give this woman a platform in the first place?
Yeah.
It's one of those things that make you want to...
Yeah, and you know what? I just have to say this. The idea that blacks are a minority in this country and whites are a big white majority in this country, I don't believe that. I think that's one of the statistical lies. I actually do believe that whites are actually the minority at this point.
Yeah, it doesn't seem...
But they can't let people know that, because then that would take away the whole social weapon of the communists.
It's a victimization thing. And it's sad. It's sad because there are many good black people, but they're being used as pawns in a very deadly game. And I do say it's deadly because what's happening right now is they are trying their best to foster a civil war. They are trying to foster a race war. And I don't want to see that happen. I want Americans to come together and to unite because we know there's a common enemy, and it's not each other. Go ahead.
You know what? All the black people I ever worked with, no matter, whether I was working as a cashier or programming or whatever I was doing, they were no different than I was. We were at the same socioeconomic level. We had the same values. There was no difference whatsoever. So this whole difference thing is, I think, conditioning of people who lived in the inner cities. And they have just been And of course, it expanded out through the universities, but with the programs, white studies, black studies, Indian studies for everything except anything that would be enlightening and help a person progress in their life.
Yeah. I'm very disturbed that there's not condemnation of the violence. I don't care about the protests, but the rioters and the lawless activities that are taking place all around us needs to be condemned and needs to be condemned strongly. And I'm not seeing that. And so that, to me, indicates that the officials in these areas are all in. And I'm looking at Governor Whitmer in our state. I have not heard this woman say one single thing to condemn the rioting and looting that has taken place in our state here in Michigan. Not one thing. Even Obama. Now, I don't hear him saying this now, but even Obama back in 2015 after Baltimore, he came out and condemned the violence.
There's no excuse for the kind of violence that we saw yesterday. It is counterproductive. When individuals get crowbars and start prying open doors to loot, they're not protesting. They're not making a statement. They're stealing. When they burn down a building, they're committing arson. And they're destroying and undermining businesses and opportunities in their own communities that rob jobs and opportunity from people in that area. So it is entirely appropriate that the mayor of Baltimore, who I spoke to yesterday, and the governor, who I spoke to yesterday, work to stop that kind of senseless violence and destruction. That is not a protest. That is not a statement. It's people, a handful of people taking advantage of a situation for their own purposes, and they need to be treated as criminals.
And
good for him.
Well, that was back in 2015. But where are the condemnations today? I'm not hearing it. The silence is deafening.
Yeah.
We got a call on the line. Let's go ahead and take the call. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Hey, Darren, Vicky, this is Art.
Hi.
I don't know where that twit is coming from with her snobby little accent there. It just drives me nuts. But I don't think this other clown, whoever she is, she misses
Hannah Jones.
King's message.
Hannah Jones, if that's
Savannah Jones.
No.
She misses
Hannah, Hannah, Hannah Jones.
She misses Martin Luther King's message. Although Martin Luther King was a card-carrying communist, I get that. But what he said was that rioting and looting is the voice of those who believe they no longer have a voice. But he also said,
and they quoted that, by the way, Art. They quoted that but they totally took it out of context. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, here was what he said during an interview with Mike Wallace in 1966, which is where this comes from. He said, should every black man or every Negro in America turn away from peaceful and become violent in his protest, Martin Luther King, would still stand as the sole voice in the wilderness to speak peace and not resort to violence. And yes, Savannah, whatever
Hannah.
Her name is,
Hannah.
Looting is violence. When you destroy another person's property, you cannot justify that. It is a crime. And I'm sorry, but it's violence. And like Martin Luther King said, rioting and looting is only the voice of those who believe they no longer have a voice. But even if every black man in America would turn away and go to the path of riot and looting, he would still stand as the lone voice for peace.
Yeah.
You know what the irony is? They say they don't have a voice, but they have lots of voices. For both the protests and for the riots and looting, they have lots of voices putting forward their point of view. the people that don't have a voice, I don't have a voice. I don't have a voice anywhere. Do you, Darren?
Well, just on this broadcast.
Yeah.
This
Here's
broadcast.
something these people need to think. Here's something these people need to take into consideration. They keep talking about they need more people of color in positions of power and blah, 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 blah. Minneapolis and Minnesota in general has so many people of color in high positions, and look at the mess that they've got. But given that, they had a chance. They say they're tired of the rich white guy, the old rich white guy. They had a chance for a young black man. They had a chance for two middle-aged black women. Who did they pick? An old rich white guy. Come on, people.
That's pretty funny.
Well, we're in a situation where
call a spade, pun intended.
People need to actually go and people need to realize that there are so many things you can do if you get on the right path, and if you want to reform or change. The problem is, I'm not sure a lot of these reforms they're talking about. I don't want to see them take place. I don't want to see people brutalized. I don't want to see people killed by cops. But at the same time, I don't want to see people committing crimes that warrant police restraint. And I certainly don't want to see crime go completely unfettered, unchallenged, and just running rampant. And that is exactly what happened after the Baltimore riots. You know, I just played the audio where Obama condemned the rioting, but Stephanie Rollins-Blake, or Blake Rollins, I think is how it was, Stephanie Rollins-Blake, the mayor there, she's the one that said, we gave them space to destroy. You know, after she tied the hands of police in Baltimore, crime went through the roof because the police were actually afraid to do their jobs. And that's what I'm afraid is going to happen in these cities where they're talking police reform. And this nitwit governor of ours here in Michigan, she's talking about doing police reform. Something that hasn't even happened. This Minneapolis thing happened in Minnesota. It didn't happen here. And yet we have to reform our police. How does that make any sense?
And now L.A. and other areas are talking about defunding the police. Well, you know what? I say get rid of the police altogether and take them back to being the militia, which is what they were to begin with, because the militia is what became the police.
Yeah.
People need to realize this. They need to take the police back to being the militia and go to simply a constitutional sheriff and a constable and a magistrate, no more judges.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, we're almost out of time. Thanks for calling in, Art. I appreciate it.
All right.
God bless you.
Great one.
Talk to you later. And in the waning moments of the broadcast, just to leave people on somewhat of a positive note, and I will say, don't ever give up your guns, folks. That's the bottom line, because where we're headed right now, it's not something you want to... Yeah, that's the saving grace that we have here right now. I'll leave you with the words of Sheriff Grady. He's a cop that knows how to handle rioting. He's a Polk County, Florida sheriff, Grady Judd. This is his words to the rioters who think they're going to take this battle of theirs into the residential neighborhoods.
We have received information on social media that some of the criminals were going to take their criminal conduct into the neighborhoods. I would tell them, if you value your life, you probably shouldn't do that in Polk County, because the people of Polk County like guns. They have guns. I encourage them to own guns, and they're going to be in their homes tonight with their guns loaded. And if you try to break into their homes to steal, to set fires, I'm highly recommending they blow you back out of the house with their guns. So leave the community alone. And we'll do our best to support the community. But ladies and gentlemen, make no mistake about it. All of that ugliness has taken away from what we're united about. We're united about the conduct that you saw with George, where his life was taken with a knee to the neck.
Okay, I'm going to cut out of it right there.
That was good. That was good. Straight up.
Yep, there you go. So on that positive note, we'll find one somewhere. Thank you very much, folks. Pray for this republic. Do what you can to restore it. Keep your powder dry. And join us back here next week. Thanks as always, Vicky. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Darren.
All right, we'll talk next week. Bye-bye, folks.